Hello, friends, and welcome to Reddit Horror. I'm Tim, and I'm thrilled you're here to dive into a world of chills and thrills. Today, we've got something special lined up. I've gathered the top 5 creepiest stories straight from Reddit, tales so spooky they'll make you double-check your locks before bed. Each one is packed with tension and shocking twists, hand-picked to send shivers down your spine. So grab a cozy spot, maybe turn on a light, or leave it off for the full effect. If you enjoy this, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. We can uncover even more eerie secrets together. All right, let's get started. We found a cave on my grandmother's property. What's inside needs to stay hidden forever. I was 17 the summer we found the cave on my grandmother's property in eastern Kentucky. I have never told this story to anyone. Not my wife, not a therapist, nobody. Sealing the cave after Grandma Edith passed should have helped, but it did not. What Chester and I saw down there has never let go of me. I was what you'd call the nerdy kid back then. Thick glasses, skinny as a rail, the type who spent lunch periods in the library. Every summer, my parents shipped me off to Grandma Edith's farmhouse in the foothills of the Appalachians, figuring the mountain air would be good for me. The house was everything a city kid like me thought was cool about the country. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, wraparound porches, and dense forest in every direction. The nearest neighbor was Chester's family, and their place was nearly a mile down the dirt road. Past that, nothing but trees and hollers until you reached the county highway. Chester was a year younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. He could fix engines, hunt, fish, and navigate the woods like he'd been born to it. Where I was pale and awkward, Chester was sun-darkened and confident. Where I worried about everything, Chester just did things. We'd become friends the summer before, mostly because we were the only kids for miles, and boredom breaks down barriers. He taught me to shoot his BB gun and which berries were safe to eat. I helped him with his summer reading and showed him how to use his family's ancient computer. "John, you worry too much," he'd say when I hesitated at creek crossings or complained about spider webs. "It's just the woods. Ain't nothing out here gonna hurt you." I wanted to believe him. Chester made the forest feel like his backyard, and his confidence was infectious. Around him, I felt braver than I actually was. That summer, we were both restless, in the way teenagers get when the days are long and the possibilities seem endless. We'd already built a rope swing over the creek, explored every deer trail, even tried to build a tree house that collapsed before we got the roof on. We needed something new, something bigger. We just had no idea what we were about to find. We found it in the 3rd week of July, during a brutal heat wave that made the air shimmer and even drove the birds into shade. Chester and I were wandering the property, desperate for something to break the monotony. "Man, there's gotta be something we ain't explored yet," Chester said, wiping sweat from his forehead. I was squinted where he was pointing. Through the dense foliage, I could make out what looked like a darker shadow among the trees, something that didn't quite fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. We shoved through brush, scratched by thorns and wrapped in spider webs. Chester led the way, while I followed and complained about the bugs. "Quit whining," he called. "You want to find something cool or not?" We found in the hillside a depression about 15 feet across, and at its center, the mouth of a cave, half covered by a rusted iron grate. Time and weather had wrested most of it away, leaving gaps just big enough for nosy teenagers to squeeze through. "Holy crap," Chester breathed, the first time I'd ever heard him sound impressed. "John, look at this." I crept closer. The opening vanished into blackness, a cool breeze drifting out with the smell of damp earth and something I couldn't place. Think it's an old mine? I asked. Nah, wrong kind of rock. Limestone country. It's a cave. A real cave. He was already kneeling at the gap, peering into the dark. I should tell my grandmother, I said. She'd just tell us to stay away, he grinned, the kind of grin that meant trouble. Come on, just a quick look. We don't have lights. My phone does. I wanted to argue, but Chester was already squeezing through the gap. His movement echoed strangely inside. Chester, wait up, I called. Being alone outside seemed worse than following. Just for a minute, his voice came back, muffled and strange. Just to see what's here. I slipped through after him, scraping my shoulder on the rusted metal. The opening immediately opened into a chamber 10 feet high and twice as wide. Chester's phone light swept over smooth limestone, carved by water through the ages. This is so cool, Chester whispered, and his voice echoed back at us from deeper in the cave. The floor was mostly level, covered with a layer of dirt and small rocks that crunched under our feet. Chester played his light ahead, revealing that the cave continued back into the hillside, much further than either of us had expected. Okay, we looked. Now, let's go back and get real flashlights if we want to explore. But Chester was already moving deeper, his phone light bobbing as he walked. Chester, just a little further, he called back. I want to see how far it goes. I followed. The alternative was standing alone in the cave mouth, and that wasn't happening. We made it 50 feet before Chester's phone died. The darkness swallowed us whole, the kind you never get in a city. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Chester? My voice sounded small. Right here. Don't panic. His hand grabbed my arm. Stay close. We'll follow the wall back. We shuffled for 5 minutes along the wall, trying not to trip. When daylight finally appeared, we were both shaking, though neither admitted it. That was awesome, Chester said, though I heard the relief in his voice. It goes back really far, I said. Yeah, we need real lights and rope. Explore it properly. I nodded, though something about the cave felt off. Maybe it was the darkness or the way our voices echoed. Tomorrow, we'll come back with supplies. As we walked back through the woods toward the house, I kept looking over my shoulder at the cave mouth. Behind us, even with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, that dark opening seemed to pull at my attention. I should have listened to that feeling. Should have told Grandma Edith or just found something else to occupy our time that summer. But I was 17, and Chester made everything seem like an adventure, even the things that should have scared us away. We came back the next morning loaded like explorers. Chester had his dad's heavy flashlight, a coil of rope, and glow sticks from his birthday. I brought a headlamp, extra batteries, chalk for marking our path, and a notebook to map it. You sure like to be prepared, Chester said at the cave entrance. Better than getting lost. He was already squeezing through the gap. We won't get lost. We got lights this time. With real light, the cave felt different. What had seemed mysterious in the dim glow of Chester's phone light now looked like a normal limestone cavern. Water had carved smooth channels into the walls, and the floor sloped gently down as we moved deeper. This is way bigger than I thought, Chester said, sweeping his light around. Several passages branched off, each fading into darkness. We spent an hour exploring the obvious routes, marking chalk arrows and dropping glow sticks. Chester sketched a rough map while I called out measurements. Left passage goes about 60 feet and dead ends. Right passage curves back and connects with the center, like a loop. The center passage drew us in. It ran straight back, sloping steadily down, and our lights couldn't find the end. That's where we need to go, Chester said, his voice excited. 2 hours in, Chester made the observation that should have sent us back. "You notice anything weird about this place?" he asked, studying the walls. "What do you mean?" "No bats, no bugs, nothing. Every cave should have bats at least. Spiders, crickets, something. But look, nothing." I stopped and looked. He was right. The place was sterile. No cobwebs, no droppings, no life. Even the puddles were clear and still, with none of the algae you'd expect. "Maybe it's too far from the entrance," I said. Chester shook his head. "Nah, caves are ecosystems. There should be something living here." We kept going. We were too caught up in the adventure to let a little oddity stop us. The cave was giving up its secrets, and we felt invincible. The center passage dropped 100 feet over 300 yards. Our chalk marks and glow sticks glowed faintly behind us. Then Chester spotted the elevated passage. "John, look up there." I followed his flashlight beam to where the wall rose to our right. About 15 feet up was another opening. Unlike the others, it was perfectly round, 4 feet across, with a steady current of air flowing out. "Feel that breathe," Chester said, moving closer to the wall. I felt it. Cool, mossy, damp, but with something else underneath. Something I couldn't place.
He was already planning our next trip. I stared at the dark hole, uneasy. The air was too cold, carrying scents that didn't belong in limestone. "I think we should head back," I said. "We've been down here a while." Chester checked his phone. "Yeah, past lunch. Your grandma's probably wondering." We followed our chalk arrows and glow sticks back to the surface, faster this time. Sunlight hit like a flood, and I had to squint against it. "Tomorrow we bring a ladder," Chester said. "Maybe we should tell someone where we're going," I suggested, "in case something happens." He gave me that look again, the one that said I worried too much. "Nothing's gonna happen. It's just a cave." But as we walked back through the woods, I kept thinking about that opening and the air flowing from it. The scent felt familiar, like something half-remembered from a dream. That night, I dreamed of deep places and moving air, and woke with the taste of moss in my mouth. Chester showed up the next morning with his dad's aluminum stepladder strapped to the four-wheeler, grinning like he had solved everything. "Borrowed it while Dad was at work. He won't miss it for a few hours." The ladder was heavier than it looked, and hauling it through the woods was an expedition in itself. We stopped every 50 yards to rest and untangle it from branches. By the time we reached the cave, we were both sweating. "This better be worth it," I muttered, helping him force it through the grate. "Trust me, it will." Getting the ladder down the sloping passage was another challenge. It was awkward in the tight space, and my headlamp cast confusing shadows. But Chester was determined, and we finally got it against the wall. "Hold it steady," he said, climbing. I braced it while his light swept the opening above. At the top, he went quiet. "What do you see?" I called. "It goes back a long way," he muffled. He climbed down, and we switched places. The ladder felt shaky under me, but I reached the opening. His light had shown the tunnel stretching back, but what struck me was the sound. Water. Dripping. Echoing as if from a much larger space. "You hear that?" I called. "Yeah, sounds like water. A lot of it." I climbed down and we stared at each other in the glow of our lights. "Underground river?" I said. "Or a lake. Only one way to find out." The elevated passage was more open than I expected. We could walk upright, the walls smooth limestone worn by water. The smile grew stronger as we moved, and the air felt thicker, carrying scents that reminded me of things long dead. After 200 feet, the passage opened. I have spent years trying to find words for what we saw, and I still cannot do it justice. The cavern was vast, the size of a cathedral, with walls fading into darkness. In the center was a lake. The water was black and still, like a mirror reflecting nothing. Our lights reached only a few inches, and when Chester tossed in the pebble, the ripples died too quickly, as if the water swallowed them. "Jesus," Chester breathed, his voice echoing from the ceiling above. I swept my headlamp around the edges. The far shore was almost beyond reach, maybe 50 feet away. "How deep you think it is?" Chester asked. "I don't know. Deep." He was already digging in his pack. "Let's find out." He cracked a glow stick, tied it to a rock with a rubber band, and tossed it in. The green light sank. And sank. And sank. It never reached bottom. The glow vanished into distance until the surface was black again, showing no trace of what we'd dropped. "That's not possible," Chester said, his confidence gone. I stepped back from the edge. The lake felt alien. The air too still, the silence too complete. Even our voices seemed muffled, as if the water absorbed them. "I think we should go back," I said. But Chester was staring at the far shore, his light barely catching shapes in the dark. "There's something over there, on the other side." I looked, and in the faint circle of light, I saw what might have been structures on the rock. Regular shapes that did not look natural. "Chester, let's go back and think about this." "We need a boat," he said, ignoring me. "An inflatable raft we could paddle over." The thought of being on that water clenched my stomach. "That's crazy. We don't even know how deep it is. What if we fall in?" "We won't. I'm a good swimmer." "In a lake that might not have a bottom?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it, he felt it too. The sense that we'd found something that should not exist. But Chester never backed down from anything. "Tomorrow," he said. "We'll think tonight and come back with a plan." As we leapt through the passage and down the ladder, I kept looking back. The darkness seemed deeper than it should, and I felt something in that water watching. That night, I could not shake the image of the glow stick, sinking into endless depths. In my dreams, I sunk with it into darkness so complete I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. Chester showed up the next afternoon with a small inflatable raft strapped to the four-wheeler, the kind meant for lazy rivers. He also had life jackets, waterproof flashlights, and a hand pump. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Borrowed from my cousin Jake. He won't miss it." I eyed the raft. It was 6 feet long, built for calm water, not underground lakes. "Chester, I think that's not going to work." "It'll be fine. It's rated for 2 people. We're light." Then I saw the flashlight he handed me. It was one of the brightest lights I'd ever seen in person. A brand called Tomb Raider, and it looked like it could sing a Broadway show. "That might cost some mountain wood,"
Despite my doubts, I helped him haul it to the cave. His enthusiasm was hard to resist, and I was curious about the far shore. But the image of that glow stick sinking into black water never left my mind. Launching took longer than we expected. The rocky shore wasn't ideal, and we had to clear stones for a spot. The whole time, I was aware of the water beside us, still as obsidian and reflecting our lights. "You sure about this?" I asked. "It's just water. Worst case, we get wet." But it wasn't just the water, and we both knew it. The lake was unnaturally still. No lapping at the shore, no movement at all. Even when disturbed, the ripples died too fast, as if the water was heavier than it looked. Chester climbed in first with a flashlight. The raft barely dented the surface, as if it floated on something solid. "Come on," he said, steadying it.
I climbed in reluctantly, paddle in hand. The moment we pushed off, I felt the lake take hold of us. It wasn't like floating, more like being suspended over an abyss. "Paddle," Chester said, shining his light ahead. The rowing was strange. The water gave almost no resistance, yet the raft crawled forward slower than it should have. It was like paddling through oil, though the water looked and felt normal when I touched it. "This is taking forever," Chester muttered after what felt like 20 minutes. I looked back, and my stomach dropped. The rocky ledge was much farther away than it should have been, barely visible in our glow. Ahead of us, the far shore seemed no closer than when we'd started. "Chester, something isn't right about this." "Just keep paddling. We're almost there." But we weren't. The harder we paddled, the less progress we made. The far shore stayed distant while the shore behind us kept receding. It was as if the lake stretched itself, bending distances in ways that defied sense. Then Chester's light touched the far side, and we both went quiet. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "I don't know, but I don't like it." The structure was 30 feet across, ringed with strange stone pillars. The rock was darker than limestone, smooth and almost metallic. Carved channels ran toward the water, and in the center stood something like an altar, though it was built for no human shape I could imagine. "We need to get closer," Chester said, but without his usual confidence. "No, we need to go back, now." I turned the raft, but he grabbed my arm. "Wait, look at the water." I followed his gaze. The water glowed faintly, as if light rose from something far below. The glow was subtle, but unmistakable. The surface shifted, a slow bulge rising, as though some unseen current was pushing up from the depths. "There's something down there. Something big." Then our gear failed. Chester's flashlight flickered and died. My headlamp dimmed despite fresh batteries. Even my watch froze at 3:47. "Chester, we're leaving. Now," I said, cracking a glow stick. He didn't argue. We paddled hard toward what we thought was shore, but the darkness pressed in and our failing lights showed almost nothing beyond the raft. Then we heard it. A sound from beneath us, deep and resonant, like rock and metal groaning under pressure. It rose from the depths and vibrated through the water and into our bones. Ripples spread across the surface and faded too quickly. The raft shuddered. "Paddle faster," Chester said, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. The sound came again, closer. The water around us began to glow, the light rising upward as if something vast was rising. We paddled in silence, our failing lights barely cutting the dark. The shore seemed impossibly far, and with every stroke I was sure we would not make it. But somehow we did. The raft scraped the rocks just as my headlamp died. We dragged it out and collapsed on the cavern floor, shaking in the shine of our last glow stick. "We can't tell anyone," Chester said finally. "They'd think we were crazy." I nodded, though part of me wondered if we were. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. As we packed up, I made the mistake of looking back. The water was still again, but I was certain something in that blackness was looking at us. For 3 days, I avoided the cave. I stayed close to the house, helped Grandma with chores, even started reading one of her old romance novels just to keep busy. But Chester would not let it go. He showed up with a restless energy I had never seen. "You can't just pretend it didn't happen," he said one Thursday morning on the porch. "I found something dangerous," I said. "Our lights failed, Chester. all of them at the same time. So we bring backups, more batteries, better lights. I looked at him and realized what I had mistaken for confidence was obsession. He could not sit still. Dark circles under his eyes showed that he was not sleeping. "I need to go back," he said, leaning forward. "Don't you want to know what it was?" I said, "No, I don't." Chester stood and paced to the edge of the porch. "Fine, then I'll go alone." "You can't. Watch me." I felt trapped between two choices. Let Chester go alone or return to something I wanted to forget. The thought of him down there by himself was worse than my fear. "If I go with you," I said, "we go at dawn, we bring extra everything, and at the first sign of trouble, we leave. No arguments." Chester grinned. "Hollow. Deal." That afternoon, we gathered supplies. Chester had found a larger raft, more stable than the first, borrowed from my sister's boyfriend. We packed flashlights, batteries, glow sticks, rope, even a first aid kit. Looking back, it was an expedition, not an adventure. "One more thing," Chester said as we loaded the four-wheeler. "I want to actually reach the far shore this time, get a closer look." Every instinct screamed no. But I had committed, and despite my fear, I was curious. The shapes we had seen haunted my dreams. I needed to know. The forest felt different on the way back, quieter. Even the birds were silent. We slipped through the grate and down to the lake, our equipment heavier with every step. The cavern was as we left it, vast and still. The water stretched into darkness, smooth as glass. Against every survival instinct, I helped him launch the boat. The crossing dragged, and with each stroke, I was more certain we were making a mistake. But something was different about the far shore. "Are those lights?" I asked, squinting. Chester raised the binoculars and went still. "There's something over there." "What?" "On the far shore, I see movement. And you're right, there are lights, not flashlights. Something else, something that glows." I snatched the binoculars. In the distance, a faint blue-green glow flickered, like the bioluminescence in the water. "Chester, we're turning around right now," I said, handing it back. My voice was a hoarse whisper. He looked through them again and gasped. Chester had gone completely silent. His mouth moved, but no words came at first. Then, in a whisper that grew louder, he began repeating, "It comes out of the water, it goes into the water. It comes out of the water, it goes into the water." I shook him, but he wouldn't stop. His eyes were fixed on the far shore, wide and shining, as though he was watching something emerge that I couldn't see yet. That's when the water around us began to glow. The luminescence rose from the depths like we had seen before, but this time it was brighter, more intense. And in that growing light, I could see the true scale of what lay beneath the water. It wasn't a lake. It wasn't a lake. It went down forever. An eye, a well, a portal, an abyss, eternal and bottomless, vast and deep, alien light, forever and ever. I screamed. I know I screamed because my throat was raw afterward, but I couldn't hear the sound over the roar of blood in my ears. Chester was screaming too, or maybe laughing. I couldn't tell which one. The eye blinked. The entire cavern shuddered as something the size of a mountain moved beneath us. Water that wasn't water displaced around us, and our tiny raft was suddenly riding waves that shouldn't exist in an underground.
They told me room 6A was storage. They lied. I worked the night shift at a psychiatric hospital, the kind of place where shadows cling to the walls,
where silence is louder than any scream, and where the patients aren't the only ones being watched. It's an old facility, built in the 1940s. Endless hallways lit by buzzing fluorescent lights, lined with heavy metal doors that slam shut with a final weight. At night, the hum of the lights fills the emptiness, broken only by the occasional scream or the metallic rattle of someone tugging too hard at their restraints. There's one rule I learned in my first week: never touch room 6A. It's the last door at the end of the East Wing. The others are full of patients, men and women in different states of despair or madness. But room 6A is different. It's locked. Always locked. The senior staff skip it during rounds, even during fire drills. If a new nurse asks about it, they just laugh and say, "Storage?" But it's not storage. The door has a nameplate bracket, long empty, the metal beneath it scratched raw, as if someone tried to claw the label off. And every time I pass by, I feel it, that subtle pull, like the air thickens around me. You know when you're at the shore and a wave drags at your ankles before it breaks? That's what the corridor feels like at the very end, as if something beneath the floor is tugging, waiting. I tried not to think about it. I tried. It was 3 a.m. when I heard it. I was doing my rounds, most patients sedated, their rooms silent. My cart squeaked against the polished tiles as I moved down the East Wing. And then I froze. Skoosh, skoosh. It came from the end of the hallway, from room 6A. Not loud, just a faint scrape, like fingernails dragging across wood or metal. Slow, repeated, deliberate. Too steady for a rat, too human. My heart slammed against my ribs. Training told me to ignore it. Every part of me screamed to keep walking, finish the round, sign the log like everyone else. But my curiosity, it's always been a weakness. I crept down the hallway, the scraping sound growing louder with every step until I was right at the door. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Hello?" The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a voice, dry, low, so close it felt like it was breathing right into my ear. "Finally, you said something." My knees nearly gave out. I stumbled back, clutching my clipboard like it might protect me. "No staff ever talks to me," the voice went on, calm. Male, maybe, but there was something wrong about it. Each word sounded like it was passing through layers of water before reaching me. "They all walk past, pretending I don't exist. But you're different, aren't you, Claire?" I stopped breathing. I had never told it my name. "Don't be afraid," it whispered. "I know things. I know everything." My mind scrambled for a reason that this had to be some kind of test, a prank by the senior nurses, but there was no way they could know what came next. "You still visit your father every Sunday. You bring him orange slices because he can't chew the peel anymore. He doesn't remember your name, but you smile anyway, don't you?" My stomach turned. Nobody at work knew about my father. I had never told him about his dementia or how he used to call me Pumpkin before he forgot me completely. How do you... It laughed softly, coldly. "I told you, I know everything." I should have run, reported it, pretended this never happened, but I stayed, rooted to the floor. There was something in its tone that wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was inviting. "Do you want to know why you dream of drowning?" My throat got dry. The drowning dreams were private. I'd had them since childhood. Dark water closing over my head, my lungs burning. A whisper calling me down. I
My voice shook. Yes. Then come back tomorrow night, alone. A shiver ran through me, colder than the hospital air. I can't. You will. The light above me flickered, buzzing angrily. When it steadied, the voice was gone. Silence flooded in. I staggered back, heart hammering, swearing I'd never return.
But the thing is, when someone tells you they know everything, the need to ask becomes unbearable. I went back. Of course, I went back. It was quieter than usual. Even the hum of the fluorescents seemed muffled, as if the hospital itself were holding its breath. By the time I reached room 6A, it was waiting. You're late. I wasn't. You were in the supply room at 12:15. You touched the haloperidol bottle twice before putting it back. You hesitated. You thought about taking it home. I froze. My fingers had only brushed that bottle. I'd wondered, for a heartbeat, if I could use it to calm my father's worsening agitation, but I'd never told anyone. I'd never acted on it. How do you— I already told you, Claire. I know you. Its voice softened, almost tender. Don't you want to know who I am? I swallowed hard. Yes. Not yet, it said. First, I'll tell you a story. One the staff will never admit. It told me about a patient long before my time, a man brought here in the 1950s, when they still performed lobotomies in the basement. A man who never aged, never died, who spoke with voices that weren't his own. They called me dangerous, he whispered. They called me a liar, a monster. Then they locked me here and erased my name. I wanted to call it nonsense, a ghost story. But the way he spoke, the certainty, the details held me like chains. You don't believe me, he said, but you will. Come closer. Against every instinct, I leaned toward the door. The slot for food trays was sealed, but there was a keyhole. Kneeling, trembling, I pressed my eye to it. At first only darkness, then movement. An eye pressed against the keyhole, staring back at me. Not bloodshot, not sick. Perfect. Too perfect. The iris shimmered faintly, like oil on water. I choked on my breath and fell backward, my elbows slamming against the wall. His laugh followed low, aware, deliberate. See, you do believe. I ran that night. I didn't finish my rounds, didn't care if anyone noticed. I swore I'd quit and find another job. But of course I didn't. Because the next night, I heard him again. It became a ritual. Every shift, I'd find myself at 6A, heart hammering, waiting for his voice. He told me things no one should know. Memories I'd buried. Thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. Secrets about the other staff, too. The orderly who stole morphine. The nurse who cried on the stairwell after every code blue. But he also told me things that hadn't happened yet. He described the red scarf I'd buy the following week. The exact words my father would say the next time he recognized me. Pumpkin, you're late. The car crash on Route 9 that would kill a doctor I'd only seen once. And every time, he was right. I stopped questioning him. I stopped fearing him. I started craving him. Until, one night, he said, "It's time to open the door." "I can't," I whispered. "It's locked." "You have a key," he said. "Bottom drawer of the head nurse's desk, third file folder, taped underneath." I shook my head violently. "No, You want answers, don't you? Don't you want to know why the dreams never stop? Why you wake up gasping for air that isn't there?" My chest tightened. He was right. He was always right. "Open the door, Claire.
Let me out and I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you what you really are. What I really am. The words sank deep, colder than ice. That night, I didn't open it. I lay awake at home, staring at the ceiling, fighting the urge. By morning, my decision was made. I stole the key. It was exactly where he said it would be, rusted, cold against my palm, heavy as if it had been waiting for years. When I reached 6A, the scratching had returned, louder now, urgent. I slid the key into the lock. It resisted, then turned with a groan. The door creaked open just enough for the smell to hit me. Damp, metallic, like rust and rot. Good, he whispered, closer than ever. Now let me show you. I pushed the door. Inside, there was no room. No walls, no ceiling, no floor, just darkness, vast, endless twisting like the space between dreams. Shapes moved inside it, many-limbed things bending the wrong way, faces peeling open to reveal more faces beneath. And at the center, him. Not a man, not really. His outline flickered, blurred, but the eyes were the same. Oily, infinite, reflecting everything I had ever been. You already belong to me, he whispered. You always have. Every dream, every drowning, it was me calling you back. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned just like in the dreams. You were never a nurse, Claire, not really. You were the patient who opened the door the first time, and every time after, you just forget, over and over. That's the game. The darkness surged forward. I stumbled back, screaming. I'm writing this now from the staff break room. My hands won't stop shaking. When they found me, I was on the floor outside 6A, the door locked again, the key gone. They asked what happened. I said I fainted. They believed me. But I can still hear him through the walls, through the vents, through my dreams. You'll come back, pumpkin. And the worst part? I think I already have.
The woman I disemboweled had something strange in her abdomen. 24 hours into my shift, I was tired, exhausted. My eyelids dragged shut of their own accord, and every time they closed, strange patterns crawled in the dark behind them, writhing like things alive. Just one more note, I told myself, and I'd be free to go home. I typed the last of the vitals, closed the laptop, and considered whether I should eat before collapsing into sleep. My body begged for food, but the thought of swallowing anything filled me with unease. Still, I rose and began the slow trek down the stairs toward the cafeteria. The hospital at dawn is unlike any other place. The lights hum like insects trapped behind the ceiling tiles. Shadows lean across the sterile floors, and every cough, every shuffle echoes far too loudly in the corridors. That was when I saw her. In the lobby, a woman slumped in a wheelchair. Her skin was waxen, her hair slicked to her temples with sweat, her eyes half-lidded, unfocused, reflected nothing, as if light itself recoiled from them. A man stood behind her, glancing between her face and the indifferent receptionist at the desk. I could have kept walking. I wanted to. My stomach twisted with hunger, my bones ached with fatigue, and yet something about her made turning away impossible. I stepped closer. My pulse quickened with each stride. The man noticed me first. "Doctor, please, my wife, Amanda, she was nauseous this morning. Her doctor gave her an admission order, but while we were waiting, she got worse. They gave me a wheelchair, but..." His words blurred. My attention was fixed on Amanda. Her lips moved, forming broken animal sounds. I pressed my fingers to her wrist, searching for the reassuring throb of life. What I found was not reassuring. Her pulse stuttered beneath my fingertips, 30 beats per minute, irregular like the faint ticking of some clock winding down. Her breath rattled, her skin damp and clammy, her eyes fluttered, then rolled slightly upward. Shock. In the middle of the lobby, surrounded by people, no one had noticed she was dying. I looked at the receptionist, who barely glanced up from her screen, irritation etched across her face. Rage flared in me, though I didn't recognize it as my own. It felt borrowed, implanted. Without thinking, I ordered the man to follow me and wheeled his wife toward the emergency department. We did not run. Running would have turned the moment into chaos. Instead, we walked, slowly, as though in a procession. I asked questions, illnesses, medications, history. But my voice trembled. I'm only an intern, I thought. If she goes into asystole now, I'll have to... I stopped the thought. I did not want to imagine CPR in that long hallway under the humming lights. We reached the ER doors. I cut through the man's explanation to the receptionist. Code red, Brenda. Open the doors now. She obeyed, and the doors yawned wide. Inside, the attending roused from half-sleep, and within moments the room filled with nurses, monitors, voices. We laid Amanda down, wires snaking across her body, screens flickering with numbers that painted her death in real time. Heart rate, 30, blood pressure, 60/30, respirations shallow, uneven. Her husband spoke of nausea, of vomiting blood earlier that morning. I pried her mouth open, saw the black crust of dried blood on her teeth and tongue. The smell that poured out was not merely iron and bile, it was ancient, rank, the kind of scent one imagines seeping from catacombs unopened for centuries. Her abdomen was distended, rigid, silent as stone. I pressed my stethoscope to her flesh, and for a moment I imagined I could hear something, not the hush of peristalsis, but a faint whispering murmur, as though the body contained not organs, but voices.
The monitor beeped. 29 BPM. Atropine, now! The attending barked. The nurse obeyed. The numbers crawled upward, reluctantly, like a creature stirred from slumber. 30, 31, 37, 40. Amanda mourned each sound, leaving her in a rhythm too precise, too ritualistic, like prayer to some forgotten god. I leaned toward the attending. It may be a perforated ulcer. He ordered an ultrasound. The black and white image revealed free fluid throughout her abdomen. She was bleeding, drowning in herself. She would need surgery. "Go fetch the chief," he told me. I obeyed. The chief came, looked once at the monitor, then made a call. "As soon as she's stable, we'll stop the bleed." 30 minutes later, Amanda was deemed stable enough for the OR. And as we wheeled her down the corridor, I felt the walls draw closer, the fluorescent lights flickering as though dimmed by her presence. In the operating room, I introduced myself to Dr. Roberts, who led the case. He nodded. "We'll need your hands. Dr. Brown will assist as second surgeon." We scrubbed, donned gowns, and began. When the first incision was made, a smell erupted, not the acrid tang of cauterized flesh, but a stench older, heavier. It clawed its way into our sinuses, made our eyes water. It smelled of earth, of graves, of something left to rot in silence for centuries. We opened her abdomen. Darkness spilled forth. Blood black as tar oozed from within, but it was not merely fluid. It was alive in its stillness, drinking in the light, bending the edges of the room. We worked deeper. The cavity stretched unnaturally, as though her body contained more space than it should. Dr. Roberts and Dr. Brown lifted the intestines out and pressed them into my hands. I should have felt the gentle rhythm of peristalsis. Instead, the coils twitched in violent, jagged spasms, as if something inside them struggled to escape. Sweat soaked my mask. My heart stuttered. I gripped the mask with trembling fingers, desperate not to drop it. Then it erupted. Intestines, blood, feces burst outward, not with the chaos of an accident, but with the inevitability of birth. The room was drenched. My glasses saved my eyes, but when I wiped them clear, the sterile field was gone, drowned in filth. The others stood frozen, their faces twisted in horror. They had no eye protection. Their eyes were wide, staring, reflecting the impossible sight before us. Amanda's abdomen had become a mouth. It widened, stretched, and from it poured not organs, but something else, something that bent the room. The lights bent toward it. The floor seemed to ripple beneath it, and the walls bowed inward. It was not a form, but many. Faces melted together, mouths opening and closing, tendrils writhing and splitting into anatomies unimagined. It was intestines, and it was not. It was flesh, and it was something older than flesh. The thing touched the surgeons, and they did not scream. They did not blink. They simply froze, their pupils swallowed by black. The door opened. Someone entered, drawn by the noise. That sound broke my paralysis. I fled. I ran until my lungs seared, until bile rose in my throat, until I collapsed, heaving in the corridor. Now the surgeons lie in the ICU, comatose. Their faces are still twisted in the same grotesque shapes I saw in the OR, as though frozen mid-horror. Their bellies swell. Sometimes they twitch in unison, in rhythms I do not recognize, yet feel in my bones. They ask me what happened, the chiefs, the attendings, the nurses, but even if I spoke, they would not believe. I know this much. Amanda was never the patient. She was the vessel, and what we released that night was not meant to be seen by human eyes.
My psycho sister just texted me. She's coming to my birthday party. Hey sis, long time no see. Got to town yesterday. I'll be there for your birthday party. XXO Anna. I burned my damn eggs reading that message. It popped up from an unknown number while I was cooking, and I just stood there in my kitchen, phone in hand, smoke rising from the pan. I hadn't heard from Anna in 3 years. I sat at the table for a while, poking out my breakfast and trying to figure out what to say. My husband came in, already dressed for work. "How's the birthday girl?" he asked, kissing my cheek. I didn't answer, just showed him the message. He shrugged. "Maybe it's time you two worked things out, babe." I said it's not that simple. I never told him the full story between her and me. He thought it was just the usual sibling drama, but Anna and I, we had full-on wars. Back when we were teens, Anna once cut my hair while I was sleeping because she noticed my curls had grown longer than hers. She couldn't stand me having anything she didn't. "How does she even know about the party?" I asked. "She still lives back in my hometown." He swore he didn't tell her. "Maybe someone on the guest list did," he offered. Then he gave me another kiss and headed out to start his long commute into the city. Eventually, I replied to her message. I thanked her, probably more politely than I felt, and said it would be nice to have her here. Then I asked if she needed my address. A few minutes later, she texted back, but completely ignored the question. "I'll be a little late to the party, but I'll make it in time for the cake." I just stared at the screen, reread it a few times. All I could think about was that moment years ago, waking up and seeing her by my bed, my hair in her hand, and her whispering in my ear, behind me, like always. I dropped my son off at school and headed to a store to buy drinks and snacks for the party, which was happening at my house. While I'm at it, I start bombing the guests with texts asking if they know Anna. Every single one of them says no, which makes sense. She lives 300 miles away, and as part of a past, I've gone out of my way to keep hidden from everyone. I also text my husband again, double-checking that this isn't some kind of surprise he planned for today or anything like that. He denies it and gets annoyed at how persistent I'm being. He doesn't get what it was like for me, always behind Anna with her obsessive, controlling personality. Especially in high school, she made it her mission to turn my life into hell. I was the artsy, socially awkward kid. She was the textbook mean girl, popular, gorgeous, cruel. I had no idea what to expect from her now, and I needed some kind of clue. Calling my parents was out of the question, but then I remembered Greg. He used to be our neighbor and one of the very few friends I had back then. I still had him on Facebook. I sent him a DM, and he quickly replied with his phone number. I called, and he was happy to hear from me and catch up. Back then, he was the only openly gay kid at our school, and he went through a lot. We bonded over being outsiders. He still lived in the same house, inherited from his parents. I asked him what he knew about my sister, and his tone changed right away. "You don't know," he sounded hesitant. "She moved back into your parents' house, right next door. I've seen her on the street a couple times. She looked thin and kind of rough after rehab, not like the queen bee from senior year." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "And what about her husband, the lawyer?" Anna had married one of the most powerful attorneys in the state a few years back, in a wedding so big it even made the papers. My parents, always the suck-ups, were proud beyond words. They split a few months ago, not on good terms from what I heard. Rumors he was cheating left and right, and poor Anna got way too unstable, hooked on meds, just trying to cope with it. I went quiet, trying to process all of that. Greg sounded like he had more to say. He started to, but stopped like he wasn't sure if he should. I pushed him. "Just say it." "The weird thing," he finally said, "that ex-husband, the lawyer, died last week. The papers didn't give much detail, just said it was gruesome. Straight nightmare fuel. Local gossip says it might have been some mob-related death, but there were also rumors the cops were looking into your sister." Another bad memory hit me while I was setting out the plates and arranging the chairs ready for the party. I remembered a birthday when I was 11 or 12, and Anna, angry that the special day was mine, pushed the cake off the table onto the floor. I lunged at her, furious, and my parents held me back, protecting her like always. They promised it had been an accident and made Anna apologize. But the next morning of a school bus, she leaned in close and whispered that same phrase in my ear. Behind me, like always. When the first guests started arriving at 6, they found me barely put together and hard to talk to. I was too anxious, waiting for the moment she'd ring the doorbell. I made an excuse and went to my room, decided to call my parents. Only they could tell me more about how Anna was doing mentally. I hated calling those two, but I did it anyway and got no answer. I tried a few more times and still nothing. It was strange. My father, a bitter old retiree, never left the house and practically lived in that chair by the phone, watching whatever game was on TV. I called Greg again and asked if he'd heard anything about my parents. He said they were still there, living the same way as always. I asked if he could check whether the lights were on at their house. He said yes, but he was just finishing making his dinner and would call me back once he went over. I thanked him and went back to the party. Most of the guests had already arrived. Friends hugged me, handed me gifts, and enjoyed the playlist I'd carefully built over the week. The only one missing was my husband, who, because of the long commute, would arrive a bit later, but not before stopping at the bakery we had hired to pick up the cake. I texted him, asking if he was on his way yet. I managed to relax a little, had a glass of wine, and started to enjoy the conversation. I even forgot about Anna for a few minutes.
until I saw Greg's name flash on my phone. I went to my room to answer. "No one's coming to the door when I knock," Greg said. He was standing outside my parents' house. "Could they be out?" "I don't think so. The living room lights are on, and your dad's truck is in the driveway." "That's weird. Can you look through the window?" "The curtains are shut. I can't see anything." "What about the door? They used to leave it unlocked sometimes." "I don't know if I should." I could hear him hesitate, wondering if it was okay to go into a house uninvited. "But I'll try." I heard the sound of a doorknob turning. It was unlocked. For a few seconds, I only heard footsteps and Greg calling out for my parents in a loud voice. Then, a sound I hadn't heard from him before. A scream of pure horror. "What happened?" I asked, gripping the phone. My God. "What's there, Greg?"
Your parents are... There's blood. Blood everywhere. What do you mean, Greg? My anxiety was about to explode. I need to hang up. Sorry, I have to call the police now. I'll call you back. I heard another, "My God," before the call suddenly ended. I tried calling him back several times, but the line was busy. Then a heavy knock on my bedroom door made me jump in shock. "Someone left the cake at the door," a friend's voice said on the other side. "Do you want us to put it in the fridge?" I was confused. I stood up and opened the door, asking what she meant. My husband was supposed to bring the cake, and he would never just leave it at the door. "Someone left the bakery box on the front mat and went away," the friend said, watching my pale, frozen face. I rushed across the living room in panic. The other guests who had been laughing a moment ago now sensed that something was terribly wrong. The front door was already open, and just as they said, the bakery's cake box was there. I walked up slowly. As I touched the ribbon, a red puddle began to form beneath the medium-sized box. I didn't need to open the whole thing to see my husband's hair inside it. My left hand flew to my mouth, like holding a scream. The right hand still held my phone, which buzzed suddenly. It was a text message from that number. From Anna. Behind me, like always.
Today's top story is a gut-wrenching tale about imaginary friends who turned out to be far too real and far too dangerous. This is our scariest yet, so brace yourselves. Never let your children meet their imaginary friends in person. Never. It was the last week of summer. That I knew. We all knew it. We all felt it. The kids in town were going to bed each night, tossing and turning, knowing they'd soon be fighting for that extra 15 minutes of sleep. Soon we'd no longer be waking up to the sun gleaming in our eyes, but instead a cacophony of alarms tearing our dreams in half. Back to early mornings and tyrant teachers sucking the lives out of our poor, captive souls. What I didn't know was that final week of summer would be the last time I'd ever see my friends that I had never even met. Kevin and Jordy were my best friends, my brothers. They were in my life for as long as I could remember. Kevin was a year older than me, and Jordy was a year younger. Our bond was nearly that of twins, or triplets for that matter. We were there to witness each other's first steps, words, laughs, everything. Even before the universe could switch on my consciousness, it was like they were always by my side, floating in some eternal void I could never make sense of. From what I can remember, my childhood was normal. I was well fed. My parents told me stories at night. They loved me enough to kiss my wounds when I took a spill. I got into trouble, but not too much trouble. My bed stayed dry most of the time. Things were good. It wasn't until I was about 9 when my normalcy came into question. Our son is going to grow up to be a freak. I bet the Smithson's boy doesn't go to his room and sit in total silence all day and night. It's not his fault. I'm a terrible father. If he grows up to be the weird kid, we are going to be known as the weird parents. The boy needs help.
My father's voice could reach the back of an auditorium, so down the hall and to the left was no chore for his booming words when they came passing through my bedroom door and into my little ears. From outside looking in, sure, I was the weird kid. How could I not be? It's perfectly normal for an only child to have a couple of cute and precious imaginary friends when they're a toddler. But that cutesy feeling turns into an acid climbing up the back of a parent's throat when their child is approaching double digits. Dad did his damnedest to get me involved in sports, scouts, things that moved fast or sounded fast, things that would get me hurt in all the right ways. Mom, well, she was Mom. I was her baby boy, and no matter how strange and off-kilter I might have been, I was her strange and off-kilter boy. As I settled into my preteen years, the QT act ended, and Act 2, or the boy get out of your room and get your ass outside act, began. For years, I had tried to explain to my parents and everyone around me that Kevin and Jordy were real, but nobody believed me. Whatever grief my parents gave me was multiplied tenfold by the kids at school. By that time, any boy in his right mind would have dropped the act and made an effort to adjust, but not me. The hell I caught was worth it. I knew they were real. Kevin and Jordy knew things I didn't. I remember the math test hanging on our fridge. A+. I'm so proud of you, my mom said. Looks like we have a little Einstein in the house. Nope, wasn't me. That was all Kevin. I'm not one to condone cheating, but if you were born with a gift like we three shared, you'd use it too. The night before that test, I was in the clubhouse with the boys. At least that's what we called it. Our clubhouse wasn't built with splintered boards and rusty nails, but with imagination stitched together with scraps of wonder and dream stuff. It was our own kingdom, a fortress perched on top of scenery of our choosing, with rope ladders dangling and winds only we could feel. The rules, no boundaries, just an infinite cosmic playground that we could call our own. It was a place that collectively existed inside our minds, a place we barely understood, but hardly questioned. Kevin was soaring through the air on a giant hawk lion zebra thing he had made up himself. He had a sword in one hand and the neck of a dragon in the other. Jordy and I were holding down the fort, and we've been trying to track down that son of a bitch for weeks. I heard my mom's heavy footsteps barreling toward my room. Somehow, she always knew. Guys, I have to go. Mom's coming in hot. Seriously? Jordy wasn't happy. You're just going to leave us hanging like this with the world at stake? Sorry, I said. It's 2 a.m. You know how my mom gets. Lucky you. My mom only barges in when I'm sneaking a peek of Channel 46 at night. At least your mom knows you like girls, not like Tommy's a mom. Isn't that right, Tommy? The vicious vernacular of the barely prepubescent boy. The usual clubhouse talk. Kill or be killed. I was not for the fight. Next time. All right, that's enough for me, guys. I have a quiz in the morning, and it's already too late. Kevin, can you meet me in the clubhouse at 10 a.m.? You got it, said Kevin. I landed back in my bed just in time for my mom to think she saw me sleeping. I only say landed because leaving the clubhouse, a place so buried deep inside my mind, felt like falling from the ground and onto the roof of an 80-story building. The next morning, I walked into Mrs. Van Bergen's math class. She had the quiz already perfectly centered on each kid's desk, ruthless. She was in her 60s, and whatever joys she had for grooming the nation's youth into the leaders to tomorrow went up in smoke like the heaters she brews before and between all classes. As I sat at my desk, I watched each kid trudge on in, with their heads hung low, but mine was always stood high. I had a Kevin. As soon as all the kids sat down, I shut my eyes and climbed into the clubhouse. Like the great friend he was, Kevin was already waiting. Question by question, he not only gave me the answer, but gave a thorough explanation on how to solve each problem. He was the smartest kid I knew. Math? No problem. History? Only a calendar knew dates better than him. Any test he helped me take was bound to find its way to the sanctity of Mom's fridge. We were getting to the last few problems when Jordy decided to make an unwelcome appearance. Tommy, Kevin, are you guys in there? Jordy yelled as he climbed the ladder. Guys, I have to go. I'm in the middle of... Jordy's round face peeked through the hatch. So I'm driving to school with my mom, and this song came on the radio. Fine Young Cannibals. You ever heard of them? No, I haven't. Seriously, though, Kevin is helping me with my... She drives me crazy. Ooh, 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 ooh. Like no one else. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Jordy? My patience with was usually deep, but quite shallow for Jordy, was used up. Jordy froze. I'll hear all about your song after school, I promise. We're getting through my math test. Academically, Jordy wasn't the brightest. Socially, too. To be honest, all of us were probably socially inept. We spent most of our free time inside our own heads and up in the clubhouse. Jordy had dangerous levels of wit and could turn anything into a joke. Although his comedic timing was perfect, the timing of his comedy was not. There were far too many times I'd be sitting at the back of class, zoning out and into the clubhouse, and Jordy would crack a joke that sent me into a violent fit of laughter. Needless to say, all the confused eyes in the physical world turned to me. And just like that, the saga of the strange kid continued. If I close my eyes tight, I can faintly hear the laughs from that summer reverberating through what's left of the clubhouse. It was the summer before 8th grade, and it began as the summer to remembered. The smell of fresh-cut grass and gasoline danced through the air. The neighborhood kids rode their bikes from dusk until dawn, piling their aluminum steeds into the yards of kids whose parents weren't home. They ran through yards that weren't theirs, playing tag, getting dirty, and wearing holes in their jeans. Most importantly, they were creating bonds and forging memories that would last and continue to strengthen among those lucky enough to stick around for the remember when, maybe grow old together. I participated in none of it. While all the other kids were fighting off melanoma, I was in the shadows of my room working on making my already pale skin translucent. Although my room was a sunlight repellent, no place shined brighter than the clubhouse. As the boys and I inched toward that last week of summer, we laughed, we cried, we built fantastic dreamscapes, rich with stories and lore. We were truly flexing our powers within the endless walls of the clubhouse, but soon, the vibrant colors that painted the dreamscape would darken into unnerving shades of nightmares. Unless one of the boys was on their yearly vacation, it was abnormal for the clubhouse to not contain all three of us. Our gift, or burden, had some sort of proximity effect. The further one of us traveled from one another, the weaker this signal would become. But something wasn't hanging up. Each week that went on, Kevin's presence became scarcer. He wasn't out of range. I could feel him nearby, sometimes stronger than usual. Kevin began going silent for days at a time, but his presence grew in a way that felt like warm breath traveling down my back of my neck. I didn't understand. By the time that last week of summer arrived, our power trio had turned into a dynamic duo. Don't get me wrong, I loved Jordy, but I could only handle so many unsolicited facts about pop culture.
Shut up, Jordy. I wasn't in the mood for jabs. No, you shut up, Tommy. We've been over this. I'm just not ready to meet up. Why not? I asked. You're just going to let Kevin go off into the void? See you later. Good riddance. I'm just not ready, said Jordy. Not ready for what? Asked Kevin. Jordy paced in a tight circle. His fists were clenched. Not ready for what, Jordy? I asked. I'm not ready to find out. I'm a nutcase, all right? The clubhouse is literally the only thing I have in my life that makes me happy. I'm tormented every day at school by all the kids who think I'm some sort of freak. I'm not ready to find out that none of this is real and that I am in fact a total crazy person. The thought nearly collapsed my spine, as it did many times before. It was the only reason we had never met. Jordy's reasoning was valid. I also wasn't ready to find out I was living in some fantasy land either. The thought of trading my bedroom for 4 padded white walls was my only hesitation. But there was no way. There was absolutely no way Jordy and Kevin weren't real. Listen to me, Jordy, I said. Think of all the times Kevin helped you with your schoolwork. Think of all the times he told you about something you had never seen before, and then you finally see it. I mean, come on. Think of all the times you came barging in here telling us about songs we've never heard before. Do you really think that's all pretend? Jordy paused, deep in thought. Anger took over his eyes as he pointed at Kevin and me. How about this? What if you two are the crazy ones? Huh? What if I'm just some made-up person inside of your head? How would that make you feel? Huh? Jordy began to whimper. You know what? It's a risk I'm willing to take, I said. If you think I'm going to take the chance I'll never see Kevin again, then you are crazy. And you know what? If I get to the park and you guys aren't there, then I'll check myself right into the loony bin with an ear-to-ear grin. But you know what else? I know that's not going to happen because I know you guys are real and what we have is special. Kevin, I'm going. It was 11:30 p.m. the next night. I dropped into the clubhouse. Are you leaving right now? I asked. Sure am. Remember, the bike trail winds up to the back of Orchard Park. We will meet right off the trail, near the jungle gym. Sounds good. Any word from Jordy? Not a thing. We had spent the previous evening devising a plan. Was it a good one? Probably not. It was the typical kid jumps out of bedroom window and sneaks out of the house operation. I didn't even know what I was going to tell my parents if I were to get caught, but it was the last thing on my mind. In the most literal sense possible, it was the moment of truth. The summer night was thick. I could nearly drink the moisture in the air. During the day, the bike trails were a peaceful, winding maze surrounded by nature, but the moon-blanched forest made for a much more sinister atmosphere. My pedals spun faster and faster with each howl I heard from behind the trees. In the shadows were creatures bred from imagination, desperately trying to come to life. Fear itself was chasing me from behind, and my little legs could hardly outpace it. I was making good time. I had never been so thirsty in my life. 10 miles seemed like such a small number, but the deep burning in my legs told me otherwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It was my mantra. Keep the rhythm tight. You're almost there. I saw a clearing in the trees. I had reached Orchard Park. I nearly needed a cane when my feet hit the grass. My legs were fried, and the jungle gym was right up the hill. I used my last bit of energy and sprinted toward the top. Nobody was there. I checked my watch. I was early. God, I hope I was early. I rode fast. I had to be early. Surely Kevin was coming. As I waited, I thought about what life would be like in a straitjacket. Were they hot? Itchy even? Was a padded room comfortable and quiet enough to sleep in? More thoughts like these crept up as each minute went by. The sound came from the woods. A silhouette emerged from the trees. Its eyes were trained on me. The shadow spoke, "Tommy?" "Jordy!" I sprinted down the hill. I couldn't believe it. I felt weightless. Our bodies collided into a hug. There he was, his whole pudgy self and round cheeks. It was Jordy in the flesh. He came. He actually came. "This is total insanity," said Jordy. "No, it's not. We're not insane." With our hands joined, we jumped up and down in circles with smiles so big you'd think we had discovered teeth. "We're not insane. We're not insane." Tears of joy ran down our faces. The brothers had united. "I'm not going to lie to you," said Jordy, wiping a mixture of snot and tears from his face. "I was scared, really scared. This whole time, for my entire life, I truly thought I wasn't right. I thought I was crazy. And to see you're real, it's just... I know. I'm glad you came." "Have you heard from Kevin?" asked Jordy. "I'm sure he's on his way." Jordy and I sat on the grass and waited. It was surreal. I was sitting with one of my best friends that I had seen every day, yet had never seen before in my life. He looked just like he did in the clubhouse. In that moment, whatever trouble I could have possibly gotten into for sneaking out was worth every second of the experience. From right behind us, a deep, gravelly voice emerged. "Hey, guys." We both shuddered at the same time and seized up. We were busted. Nobody allowed on the park after dark, and we were caught red-handed. Once again, the adults came to ruin the fun. "I'm sorry," I said to the man. "We were just meeting here. We're leaving now." "No, guys," the voice said cheerfully. "It's me, Kevin." I don't know how long my heart stopped before it started beating again, but any machine would surely have said I was legally dead. This wasn't the kid I played with in the clubhouse. This man towered over us. He was huge. What little light the night sky had to offer was blocked by his wide frame, casting a shadow over us. His stained shirt barely covered his protruding gut, and what little hair he had left on his head was fashioned into a bad comb-over, caked with grease. I can still smell his stench. This is incredible. You guys are actually real. You both look exactly like you do in the clubhouse. I'm so excited. Kevin took a step forward. Want to play a game or something? We took a step back. There were no words. Kevin took the back of his left hand and gently slid it across Jordy's cheek. Kevin's ring sparkled in the moonlight. God, you're just as cute in person as you are in the clubhouse. There were no words. Kevin opened his arms. Bring it in, boys. Let me get a little hug.
I didn't know what was wider, my mouth or my eyes. Each muscle in my body was vibrating, not knowing which direction to guide my bones. Away was the only answer. Jordy's frozen posture made statues look like an action movie. Kevin grabbed Jordy by the back of the neck.
Come on over here, you big goof. Give me a hug. Kevin looked at me. You too, Tommy. Get over here. Seriously.
Jordy was in Kevin's massive, hairy arms. Fear radiated from his trembling body. There were no words.
Come on, Tommy. Don't be rude. Get on in here. Is this how you treat your friends?
Jordy began struggling. There were no words. Kevin's eyes and mine met. I could hear his breathing. The moment felt like eternity. With Jordy dangling from his strong arms, Kevin lunged at me. Like a rag doll, Jordy's feet dragged across the grass. Kevin's sweaty hands grabbed my wrist. I can still feel his slime. There were no words, only screams. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. In that moment, there was no thinking. The primal brain took over. I shook, I twisted, I turned, I shuddered, I kicked, I clawed. The moment my arm slid out of his wretched hand, I ran. The last thing I heard was Jordy's scream. It was high-pitched. Desperation rushed my ears, its sound finding a permanent home in my spine. The wails continued until Kevin, with great force, slapped his thick hand over Jordy's mouth. I'd never hear Jordy's laughter again. The clubhouse. I miss it. Mostly. I haven't truly been back in over 20 years. I don't even know if I remember how to do it. It's probably better that way. After that terrible night, I spent the next couple of days going back to the clubhouse trying to find Jordy. I prayed for a sign of life, something, anything to tell me where he might be so I could save him. The only thing I caught were glimpses of the most egregious act no man could commit. Only monsters. I don't care to share the details. On the third day after Kevin took Jordy, my parents and I were on the couch watching TV when our show was interrupted by the local news. Jordy's face was plastered across the screen. His body was found in a shallow creek 20 miles outside of town. My parents' face turned whiter than their eyes were wide. They looked at me. I couldn't tell if those were faces of disbelief or guilt. Maybe both. There were no words.
Every once in a while, I muster up the courage and energy to walk alongside of the clubhouse. I can't quite get in, but I can put my ear up to the door. I can still hear Kevin calling my name.
And that's it for today's spine-chilling journey through the top 5 Reddit horrors. I hope these stories kept you on the edge of your seat and maybe even gave you a few goosebumps. If you loved the thrills, don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Horror. I'd be so excited to share more eerie tales with you in the next video. Until then, stay spooky, and I'll see you soon.